Today I want to minister to you from two scriptural references. The first one being 2 Kings chapter 20, verses 12 through 19. And the second being 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verses 22 through 31. 2 Kings 20, 12 through 19. 2 Chronicles 32, 22 through 31. I will begin with 2 Kings 20 and 12. At that time, Berodach-Baladan, the son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent letters and a present unto Hezekiah. For he had heard that Hezekiah had been sick. And Hezekiah hearkened unto them, and showed them all the house of his precious things, the silver and the gold, and the spices, and the precious ointment, and all the house of his armor, and all that was found in his treasures. There was nothing in his house, nor in all his dominion, that Hezekiah showed them not. Then came Isaiah the prophet unto King Hezekiah, and said unto him, What said these men? And from whence came they unto thee? And Hezekiah said, They are come from a far country, even from Babylon. And he said, What have they seen in thine house? And Hezekiah answered, All the things that are in mine house have they seen. There's nothing among my treasures that I have not showed them. And Isaiah said unto Hezekiah, Hear the word of the Lord. Behold, the days come that all that is in thine house, and that which thy fathers have laid up in store unto this day, shall be carried into Babylon. Nothing shall be left, saith the Lord. And of thy sons that shall issue from thee, which thou shalt beget, shall they take away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Then said Hezekiah unto Isaiah, Good is the word of the Lord which thou hast spoken. And he said, Is it not good if peace and truth be in my days? I move now to 2 Chronicles 32, beginning at verse 22. Thus the Lord saved Hezekiah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem from the hand of Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, and the hand of all other, and guided them on every side. And many brought gifts unto the Lord to Jerusalem, and presents to Hezekiah king of Judah, so that he was magnified in the sight of all nations from thenceforth. In those days Hezekiah was sick to the death, and prayed unto the Lord, and he spake unto him, and he gave him a sign. But Hezekiah rendered not again according to the benefit done unto him, for his heart was lifted up. Therefore there was wrath upon him and upon Judah and Jerusalem. Notwithstanding, Hezekiah humbled himself for the pride of his heart, both he and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, so that the wrath of the Lord came not upon them in the days of Hezekiah. And Hezekiah had exceeding much riches and honor, and he made himself treasures for silver and for gold and for precious stones and for spices and for shields and for all manner of pleasant jewels. storehouses also for the increase of corn and wine and oil, and stalls for all manner of beasts, and coats for flocks. Moreover, he provided him cities and possessions of flocks and herds in abundance, for God had given him substance very much. This same Hezekiah also stopped the upper watercourse of Gihon and brought it straight down to the west side of the city of David. And Hezekiah prospered in all his works. Howbeit, in the business of the ambassadors of the princes of Babylon, who sent unto him to inquire of the wonder that was done in the land, God left him to try him, that he might know all that was in his heart. The scriptures speak openly about the greatness of Hezekiah, but it also reveals that Hezekiah walked with an inherent weakness, much like many of us. We have strengths, we have weaknesses. The thing is to try to make sure that our strengths are stronger than our weaknesses are weak. Hezekiah had become prideful even while he was doing great works, or more appropriately spoken, while God was doing great works through him. I want to inhale that thought for a moment. Even while God is doing great works through us, we can become prideful. Sometimes we can begin to believe that the works that God is doing through us are the works that we're doing for God. We get it turned around. We think we're doing something for God rather than God doing something through us. So there were three major lessons I think we can learn from Hezekiah's mistakes. But I want to title this message, "What Have They Seen in Thy House?" What have they seen in thy house? Because it ties into all of the lessons that I think we can learn from Hezekiah. The first lesson I think we can learn from Hezekiah is that he couldn't see himself. He couldn't see himself. And for many of us, this becomes a challenge because we see ourselves the way we see ourselves, and we believe that's an accurate picture of who we are. When in fact, that's probably the most inaccurate picture of who we are. We think we know ourselves better than anyone else does, when in fact, usually that's not the case. Usually other people can tell us things about ourselves that would surprise us because we don't watch ourselves the way other people do. It probably also would be surprising to us to realize that our greatest vulnerability often occurs while we are experiencing the victory for which we have fasted and prayed. The light of victory can actually veil the darkness of impending defeat. You see, it requires a very mature mind to spiritually discern a potential defeat that may be hiding in the shadows of victory. 1 Corinthians 10 and 12 warns us by saying, "Wherefore let him that thinketh he standeth take heed lest he fall." Yet we often remain more vulnerable than vigilant during the jubilation of victory than we were during the tribulations of battle. The truth is that most of us simply desire the battle to be over so we can put away our weapons and rest. But there is no rest on this side of life's journey. Death is our only possibility of rest, and we must be saved for that to occur. We have to be careful about celebrating our victories. Because while we're celebrating, the enemy is attacking. He knows that we get tired. He does not. He knows that we become distracted. He does not. He knows that we have time limitations. He does not. And so he who searches for opportunities to come in and do damage to our lives waits for the time when we relax our guard, and we tend to do that when everything is going well. We want to put our weapons down and chill. Hezekiah only had one person who could see him other than himself, and that was Isaiah. And by that I mean there were a lot of people who could see him, but they couldn't say anything. He was the king. You don't criticize a king. And many of us don't want anyone to criticize us to our face or behind our back. We just don't want to be criticized. We don't mind so much being complimented. But I'm more attuned to the criticisms than I am to the compliments, because I've learned that compliments often are not issued from the right heart, just like criticisms. Criticisms very often are more accurate in terms of what people actually see. And Hezekiah had learned that everybody's not going to tell me the truth. So during times of duress, he would send for Isaiah and lean upon his insight and his wisdom. When things got rough, he would send for the man of God. Give me a word from the Lord. I need to know what's happening around me. I need to know what you see within me. However, when he became comfortable that all was well, he made a fateful decision based only upon the fact that Babylon and Judah shared a common enemy in Assyria. Assyria hated Babylon, and Babylon hated Assyria. And at this time, Assyria was the stronger nation, and so they were dominating Babylon and Judah, and they were requiring tribute to be sent from both countries off and on. And it wasn't Judah's turn at this moment, it was Babylon's turn. And so Hezekiah operated from the perspective that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's not always the case. Sometimes the enemy of your enemy is an enemy of your enemy for reasons different than yours. And so Hezekiah failed to recognize that Judah only had one real friend, and that was God. And truthfully, the same thing as us. We only have one friend that can handle business, and that's God. We might have a lot of people that have a heart towards us, but only one that has a heart towards us that also has a hand on our situation, and that's God. So Hezekiah had become a blind king. So blind that he figured as long as he was going to be all right, then everything was good. You see, when Isaiah said, listen, son, you messed up. And because of your mess up, everything that you showed them, they're going to come and get it. It just won't happen during your life. Hezekiah said, that's good, right? I mean, that's good news for me, right? See, he couldn't see that, no, son, that's not good news for your children and your children's children. So you and I can't afford to make that same mistake. We have spiritual mirrors around us, and we must rely upon them. One of the reasons that God gives us apostles and prophets and evangelists and pastors and teachers is for the perfecting of the saints. In other words, to show us how we look. Because a lot of times we don't realize how we look. See, a man gets in his own home and he says, I'm the king of this castle. No, you're not. Jesus is the head of every man. That's what the Bible says. That's what the Bible says. So if there's a king in your castle, it's Jesus. And even though you're the designated head of the wife, you're supposed to head her the way Jesus heads you. So sometimes we're not so good at doing that. One of the mirrors that we have is, as husbands is a wife, and as wives are husbands, and as parents, our children can be mirrors for us, and good friends can be mirrors for us, and the spiritual leaders can be mirrors. The thing is, you need mirrors that will tell you the truth. If all you ever get is compliments, people are lying to you. And there are those of us who, that's all we hardly ever get is compliments. If you're the bomb.com, you could be the blister on my behind.com. You see, people will tell you stuff that may only be true for the moment, and it may not be true on the whole. Because we just try to have conversation and get along. People won't always tell you that you're getting on their nerves. They won't always tell you that your ways don't always fit into what your words say. People won't always tell us the truth. We need mirrors that will show us the reality of who we are, what we're doing, and not just at certain times. See, Hezekiah didn't want Isaiah around him all the time. He just wanted Isaiah around him when he was in trouble. He didn't offer Isaiah a home in his castle. He just wanted him to show up when I sent for you. And so he was blind. Such as some of us. See, we need mirrors around us because we cannot always rely upon our own sight. or insight. Lesson number one, Hezekiah couldn't see himself. Can you see yourself? Who are your mirrors? How do you know that you are who you say you're trying to be? How many people do you have in your life that actually will tell you the truth about who you are and what you're doing? And how do you know? How do you verify whether what people are telling you is the actual truth or not? Lesson number two. Hezekiah revealed all that he possessed to his future enemy. We have a way of thinking that this is my good friend. Therefore, they always going to be my good friend. That don't always work out. Sometimes a person can be your good friend for 5, 10 years. And then something happens and they're not your good friend anymore. But they got all your treasures and secrets. You told them everything, you showed them everything. You know, I remember a friend of mine years and years ago who had a very, very attractive wife, and he used to brag about her all the time, all the stuff that she did and so forth. And one of our other friends took her and went on. You know, if she that good, I need her. You see, you don't know who your future enemies are because you don't know how life is going to treat you. You don't know how life is going to treat them. Amen? Come on here now. So Isaiah rebuked him and declared that one day the king of Babylon would come and take from Jerusalem all that he had put on display. What I learned from this is we can't afford to show our enemies all that we have. We can't even afford to show our friends all that we have. You gotta have circles of people that you show, that you reveal. You know, you have to exercise some wisdom in this thing. You see, everyone doesn't need or deserve to enter into our lives. One of the first things I learned as a new manager is I got promoted from within the ranks and I became a manager. Those was my ex-friends. I couldn't treat them like friends anymore. I'm in a different place now. They are not going to see me the same. I need to recognize that they're not going to see me the same and act accordingly. You can't lead people and be on the same level with them. It does not work. You can't be friends with your kids and parent them too. You have to decide to be a parent. They'll find friends. Everybody doesn't need to know what we think or understand how we feel. There are times when you really got to shut your mouth because you're in the wrong place to share your thoughts. There are people who just will take what you give them today, make a weapon of it, and use it against you tomorrow. And you have to be real careful about that. It can even be prideful to bring people into our homes and show them how God has blessed us. Because we may think that everybody will be happy for us and glorify God, but in truth, we can create temptation for others and trouble for ourselves. Yeah, the man came to our house, an insurance man, and my wife showing him all around the house. I'm like, cut that mess out. Stop that immediately. Everybody don't need to come to my house. I'll be honest with you. Everybody don't need to come to my house. Everybody don't need to come to your house. You got to be wise about this kind of stuff. I used to tell my kids, you can bring your friends to the living room. Now they know how you live. Everybody don't need to be walking all through your house and stuff. Listen, we can't be so prideful. We want everybody to see what we got. Yeah, I got this, and I got that, and I got that. And you may be creating such temptation for them. You may be tempting them into covetousness. You may be tempting them into envy. You don't have a right, because God is not going to necessarily get the glory out of that. Everybody's not happy because you got a new car. Some folk actually are unhappy because you got a new car. You get a raise on the job, you telling folk, they want to know, did you get more than I got? You see, we should only reveal our blessings to those whom God has selected, because he knows who can handle it in the right spirit. A long time ago, I learned that if you got stuff, don't show it off to people who don't have the same stuff. Show it off to people who have at least what you have, or preferably more. Because you don't want to appear to be bragging. You want to keep yourself in a position of humility. If you have anything, you got it because God let you have it. Ain't nothing so great that you did. Ain't nothing so great about who you are. There's no need to brag about anything here. There are 3 additional points I think we can learn from lesson 2. The first one is, remember where you came from. I know where I came from. I know how it was back in the day. See, a lot of young people, they don't know how it was back in the day. They haven't seen days like that. They look at the documentary and go, Lord have mercy, that must have been back in the 1800s. No, that was 50 years ago. Yeah, that was back when I was young, Hezekiah thought the reason the messengers came from the king of Babylon was to express their sympathy because they heard he was sick. They actually came to see how sick he was. Because God was blessing him. They were measuring Babylon against Judah. He couldn't understand that because he wasn't thinking the way they were thinking. And a lot of times in dealing with other people, saved and unsaved, we need to remember that before we were saved by God's grace, we were without strength and on our way to hell. So we don't need to give anybody the impression that we were saved by our own strength or that we've been blessed because of our good works. All glory has to go to the cross. And because all glory has to go to the cross, the leading of how we share about ourselves and who we are, what we're doing, needs to emanate from the Lord as well. You see, often as people are examining how we have been blessed, they'll lose sight of who it was who blessed us. Because everyone isn't mature enough to digest our praise reports. We must not cast our pearls before those who won't recognize their true spiritual value. Because remember, we didn't always have pearls to cast. See, Hezekiah should have just been telling his visitors, all that I am and all that I have is by the grace of God. They didn't need to see it all. They just needed to know that it came from God. The second thing is, remember whose you are. There ain't no stuff that's so wonderful that it outshines who Jesus is. The biggest TV, and I like big TVs, I can see them better. As long as I got a wall and the TV ain't bigger than the wall, I think it's a good size. But there are those who would look and say, oh man, look at that, he's showing off. No, it's just I'm trying to see. Got to remember who we belong to. We've been redeemed by the blood of the cross, and that makes us debtors to God. We have been bought with a price, and all that we have belongs to him. If it's our stuff and he owns us, he owns all our stuff. And Hezekiah should have just told his visitors, whatever I have, it's not mine, it belongs to God. See, the issue of failing to see ourselves is huge because we can easily forget that we own nothing. We are all leasing at best, but probably renting. We can't claim possessions any more than a slave could claim the hut his master allowed him to live in. A slave could only claim the last meal he had already eaten. That's about all we can claim either. We are just dust awaiting a final disposition. There is nothing for us to be prideful about. There's nothing for us to be showing off. And that includes stuff that's within us. You have to be real careful about allowing people to know you in certain ways, because they'll look past the Jesus in you and see the rest of you and measure you according to that. And then the third mini lesson here is to remember where you're going. You are planning to go to heaven. But King Hezekiah became puffed up with pride as he showed off the gold and silver to his visitors. They were greatly impressed. But he should have told them, what I have here is nice, but it's nothing compared to the glory that shall be revealed in heaven. They paved the streets with gold. When we remember where we could have been, it's easier to properly value where we're going, and much more difficult to be prideful about material things. After all, our possessions are not going with us. I'm reminded of a joke I heard about a man who entrusted his three closest friends with $50,000 apiece to hold towards his death because he didn't want his wife to get his money. He asked each man to put the money in his casket so he could take it with him. So at his funeral, after the funeral, the three men got together to compare notes. The first man admitted that he only put $40,000 in the casket, and he purchased a car with the remaining $10,000 because he said, I think my friend would have wanted me to have a nice car. The second man said, well, I only put $25,000 in the casket, and I paid off debts with the rest of the money because I think my friend would have wanted me to be debt-free. The third man said, I put $60,000 in the casket. And the other two men were just amazed. Why did you add an additional $10,000 to what he gave you? He said, I felt I should put extra money in because I wrote him a check. You can't take it with you. So if you can't take it with you, there's no need to be proud of it today. There's nothing about us that we need to be so proud of that we want to show it off, because you have to remember that Hezekiah misinterpreted why the Babylonians were there. And we can misinterpret why people are interested in seeing who we are, how we think, what we feel, what we got. Who we are, how we think, what we feel, what we have. Satan wants to know who we are, how we think, what we feel, and what we have. What does he want to know? Who we are, how we think, what we feel, and what we have. Who we are, what we think, how we feel, and what we have are the doorways to him being able to come in and rob us. Jesus said, the thief cometh not, but for to steal, and to kill, and to destroy. That's exactly what the Babylonians came to Judah for, to steal, and to kill, and to destroy. They did not just come to steal. They came to kill, and they came to destroy. They didn't want two rocks laying on top of each other when they left. They wanted to know, who are these Judean people? What do they think? How do they feel about what they have, and what do they have that we can take? So lesson 3 of the major lessons and the final lesson here is perhaps one of the biggest ones. Hezekiah forgot that his enemies were also God's enemies. You see, when God is blessing you and me, when Satan comes and looks at us, he's not concerned about us. He's looking at the storehouse of the blessings of God. When God has blessed you with spiritual things and material things, Satan will believe that if I take your material things, your spirit will fall. Not many of us are like Job, where we can lose everything and stay focused. If he can reduce me from praising to complaining, if he can turn my attentions away from being in the house of the Lord to being outside of the house of the Lord, if the only thing that matters is, let me just take his stuff and I'll pull him away from the Lord. That's what he said to God about Job. Let me get his stuff. Let me mess with his health. He'll curse you and walk away from him. And not all of us are strong like Job. We got nice stuff, and many of us, our hearts are attached to our stuff more than we think. And Job lost all his children and so forth. Many of us, if we lose all our children, all of them, we pull back from God. You see, the Babylonians didn't just come to take Judah's stuff. The Babylonians came to prove that their God was greater than Judah's God, and the proof was that they were able to come in and take all of Judah's stuff and take the people into captivity. And what is your God doing now? We're looking at you in captivity. We're looking at you in captivity. We don't see your God doing very much for you. You looked good when you were at home with your stuff. But now that you're here in captivity, you don't look so good anymore. You don't look so strong anymore. And if you read the book of Esther, not one time is God mentioned in the entire book. The vast majority of the people forgot about him. You got to be careful who you let see what you got. You got to be careful who you allow to know how you think or how you feel. You got to be careful who you allow to become close to you. They could become your future enemy. You could be training your future enemy how to attack you. Hezekiah forgot that his enemies were also God's enemies. So Isaiah asked him, "What have they seen in thine house?" What have they seen in thine house? How have they managed to get? See, before they got into his house to see all the gold and silver and stuff, they had gotten into his head. Remember, we read how all these nations were bringing gifts to him, and he was just blowing up. Even the Babylonians are coming to worship at my feet. I'm the man. And very often people will blow you up with compliments, build you up and make you think you the best thing since sliced bread. Because they want to get in your head. He wouldn't have just showed anybody his gold and silver. They got in his head. And then when they got there and they were so complimentary and so impressed, they touched his heart. These are my friends. They like me. They really admire me. I'm sure they came with all this flowery language like, "Oh my God, we heard you were sick and now you're up on your feet. Oh, you've been healed. Oh my goodness, look at you. Look how blessed you are. Oh, you are in fact the greatest king on the planet. Yeah, let me show you what I got. Let me show you how blessed I really am." He told Isaiah, there's nothing that I have that they didn't see. So they knew what his army looked like. They knew all his weapons. They knew everything he would protect and where the stuff was and how he would need to develop strategies to protect it and everything. You know, some of us, we let folk get close to us believing that those people have our best interests at heart. But in a few years, they may well not have your best interests at heart because they've sacrificed nothing to be in your life. You see, anybody who's in your life who has sacrificed nothing to be there, that's what they need to see. Nothing. But what God wants you to reveal. You see, a person who's really sent by God to be in your life is going to come in the same way that Jesus came, by sacrifice. That person is going, see, sacrifice is going to usher them in, so you'll know this person was sent by God. You'll be able to hear it in things that they say that you know only God could have revealed to them. So you know they've been praying. You'll be able to see it in things that they are willing to do for you that only God would have led them to do, because folk don't just sacrifice themselves for no reason. See, you got to have a measuring stick about who you're truly going to open your life up to and let them see into what you think, how you feel, what you have, and ultimately who you are. Hezekiah didn't construct any kind of mechanism at all for these people to have to demonstrate themselves. And he didn't know them, because had he known them, he would have known that Babylon was an enemy of God and God's people. They saw themselves and their gods as the chosen people. In fact, if we think back, Abram at that time was commanded to leave from amongst them and go out in the desert, not even knowing where he was going. Where am I going? It don't matter. Just get out of there. He left Babylon because they worshiped false gods, although they had been given opportunities to worship the true and living God. If you go back to the book of Job, Job lived in the same general vicinity, and his friends were among those in that vicinity who came to him with perspectives about his God that they didn't serve at the time. So the thing is that the Babylonians had decided to become the enemies of God, and they will be until the end of time. If you read the Revelation, Babylon is spoken of as in enemy terms. They had no business in Hezekiah's house. And they certainly had no business seeing what God had given to Hezekiah. And the same is true of our hearts. Satan has no business being able to enter into our heart and look around and see what God has stored within. And we have to be careful to guard our hearts against enemy intrusion. If we allow Satan to come in, he will corrupt our hearts and our minds and cause us to desire what we shouldn't, and cause us to protect things instead of our relationship with God. Pastor Mason was talking this morning about how people do what they want to do, and he talked about being intentional. All of us are intentional. We're just not all intentional about the right things. I got certain TV shows I'm intentional. I plan to see them. I've gotten less focused on that over time, though. I've learned that, if I'm going to watch, I just watch something. It's nice now. You can pretty much watch what you want to, but I've just learned that I got to value my time a little better. I got to use my time the way I want to use my time, not let CBS or whoever dictate when I'm gonna have time. I just got Direct TV, they threw in the NFL package, whatever, the NFL ticket or whatever that is, Sunday ticket, yeah. Right. And I've already decided that ain't gonna rule my life. That ain't gonna rule my life. Because there was a time when I would have been like all day and most of the night. I mean, the chair would have just had a dent in it. But I've just decided that's not gonna rule my life. See, because I want to be intentional, and I know I'm being watched. You should know you're being watched. And if my watchers only see me watching TV, see, I think it's important for my wife to see me in the Word of God. I think it's important for her to hear me pray. I do it in front of a mirror so I can see myself. That carries a powerful weight. But listen now. Hezekiah has told us, guard your heart and your life, and don't let Satan just come in and see what he can see. Don't let it happen. Don't let it happen. He has no business knowing what you think, how you feel, what you have, or who you are, except what God would have you to reveal. Amen? You don't need to be like Judah that had to go into captivity to realize we should have been serving God all along. Amen? So watch yourself. And find your true mirrors and use them so they can let you know what they see. So you can govern yourself accordingly. Because by now we're supposed to be mature. Most of us by now are supposed to be mature believers. You've been taught meaty words. So you should be growing up and becoming mature believers. You got to realize the enemy would want you more than ever right now. So govern yourselves accordingly. Trust the mirrors that God puts in your life. And learn how to be that person that you're really intentionally claiming to want to be. Amen? To God be the glory. Would you stand with me?